I remember there were many days when I would just look at a piece of paper and not know what to draw. The worst feeling was when I wanted to draw something, but I just couldn't grab onto an idea. I remember there was one of these times when I just didn't know what to draw at all, and so I just ended up staring at the door in front of me. I remember it was a wooden door, so it had a lot of grain and stuff to it. And sometimes I find when you just stare at something for long enough, you can start to see patterns and shapes in it. Like when you look at a cloud and it kind of looks like something, or you think you can see the face of the moon. You can usually see something like that, an eddy noise grain pattern if you look long enough. But don't worry, that's not the secret to running out of ideas. That wouldn't be a very good way of coming up with ideas. I'm just telling you that because when I looked at that door, I thought I saw some characters in it. One kind of looked like a cloaked figure. One kind of looked like the rock, with a face with fire coming out of it. And one kind of looked like a fish thing with legs and headphones. So I drew them down, and over the course of many years, I slowly began to edit them and improve them. These were the first characters for what I would eventually call Blobby Adventures, which is what the series for everything I make is called. And over time, I began to add more to it. Instead of there just being a few characters, I added more. And then I came up with a village, then a futuristic village, then a volcano, then a gray city, then more and more, and I just kept kind of adding and adding to it. I think when it comes to ideas, there's two types of them: inspired ideas and logic ideas. Inspired ideas come from things when you're walking down the street and see a roof that looks like a chocolate bar, so you end up making an entire house from candy. Or when you see an acorn that's shaped like a soldier's helmet, so you end up making an acorn knight. I think most people come up with ideas this way. I know I did, but I don't think that's a very good way of coming up with ideas. It kind of requires you to get inspiration from something, and if you're not inspired, you're out of luck. That's why there were so many times when I would just end up looking at a blank piece of paper for hours. But then there are logic ideas that I don't think enough people use. Basically, a logic idea is when you get an idea from something that just has to be made instead of getting inspired from something. What I mean by this is, say you make a village. You need something in that village, so then you might start thinking through, like a bakery, or a clothing store, or a hotel, or some houses. Maybe you need a farm, and so then you think about what type of things they would grow there. And depending on the type of food they have, what type of grocery stores they would have, what would they look like, what their style would be like, and their design. You're not getting inspired for these things, you're just reasoning them out because they have to be made. And this is what I started doing with Blobby Adventures. When I started making villages and things, just started coming up with ideas for things that needed to be made. It's hard to be inspired all the time. That type of stuff just has to come naturally. But with logic ideas, you really don't have to think about it too much. You just take what you have already and think about what needs to be made. There were many times, as I've said, that I felt like drawing, but I just couldn't get an idea. But by thinking about things this way, I can kind of just go to something I already have existing and think about what else needs to be made for it to exist. Like, look at this picture. I just got inspired one time to make this kind of cozy, magical, nighttime forest scene. I forget how I got inspired, but I just felt like drawing it, and I didn't really have much more thought to it, aside from what you see. I didn't have any idea for what's inside this tree building place. But then there was another time when I kind of wanted to draw a cozy picture, kind of similar to this one, but I wasn't sure what to do. But then I thought back to this one, and that's how I came up with this picture. Imagine it takes place in a similar area to the other one, similar type of house to that tree house thing, but inside. I probably wouldn't have thought to do this, but because I had the other picture and no plans for what it should look like inside, I came up with this one. I didn't really have to think hard about it. I didn't have to spend hours looking for ideas. I just came to the conclusion that this is what it would look like if the inside of that house looked like that. And this is really just how I make art now. Of course I get inspired, I'm an artist, but most of the time I just use these logic-based ideas to come up with things. Now, the downside of this is that it kind of requires you to have a world built. And I know this is something that can be a lot of work to get started. It's fun to just make one-off things and not have to worry about fitting it into a whole world. But I think it's worth it if you get art block frequently, which you probably do if you're an artist. It can be really intimidating to just start working on a world that has to all fit together. But I don't think you have to really think about it like that. Just take something that you've made before, and then think about what else could exist with it, where it takes place. Use what you've already made as a base, and just expand off of it. Everything I make now, absolutely everything, is connected to Blobby Adventures. And the reason I do that is because every time I add something, it adds a million new options for ideas. Recently, I really felt like making something related to chess. I don't know why, I guess it's just that kind of chess time of year. But I wasn't really sure what to draw. Meanwhile, I had this winter village, and I wasn't entirely sure what the inside of this big building here should have. I also wanted this place to have a big library, but again, I wasn't really sure what it should be like. So now I have this place that needs a library. It's in this cold area. It's very fancy and elegant looking, and I also want to draw chess. The result of this was this. A chess-themed library guarded by knights. I really would not have come up with this if I didn't already have the existing idea of the Winter Village. I'm absolutely certain if I didn't have Blobby Adventures, I would have just drawn some chess-themed image, like two blobbers playing chess or something really boring. But because of this whole Blobby Adventures series, I was able to come up with this idea, which is so much more creative and unique, and now I have a lot more to work with. I mean, how do these characters react with all the other characters? How do they fit into the world? It just adds so much just from that little idea. I hear a lot of artists say they get art block, which is when you just don't know what to draw. And I used to get that so much, but I literally haven't had any art block since I started Blobby Adventures. I really don't know how well this is going to work for other people, but for me, this is my art block be gone spray. Something that I love doing now is just going back to old sketchbooks and looking through them and finding things that I made, just one-off things I drew randomly one time, and then finding a way to incorporate them into Blobby Adventures. Whether it just be a weird item, I remember I made this plant backpack thing, still not sure how I'll incorporate it, but it's just a fun little idea I drew with no plans for it, and now it could possibly be used somewhere important. Here, let's go back to that wooden door. Remember I said there were those guys that kind of looked like they were a hooded figure or something? At the time, I had absolutely no plans for them. I just made them and that was it. But then with Blobby Adventures, I made a city for them, and then I started making buildings for them and what their world would be like, and eventually I created this. It's a very good contrast to other things I've made in Blobby Adventures because it's so gray and boring and bleak. It's fun to just come up with the most boring and miserable things to put here. I decided to make it so that all colors above a certain threshold would be banned, which I think is just a fun idea and it just shows how bleak and depressing this place is. And then because of that, I started thinking, what would their art be like? What would their paint stirs be like? And while I haven't come to a conclusion about that yet, it's a place for me to start working on. I mean, what would their paint stir be like? They'd probably have a lot of whites and grays, very faded pastel colors. Nothing too nice though. It's just kind of fun to think about it. It's so much easier than having to rely on getting an idea from something. Because although ideas and inspiration stuff is fun when it happens, you really can't control it. You can try looking up pictures or something about what you want to make, but you can't rely on that. Inspiration is great when you're able to catch it and when you pay attention to things that could inspire you, but a lot of the time you're stranded without an idea. With logic ideas, you can really just pull them up in a second as soon as you need something to draw. Here, let me do that right now. Let me take this futuristic city that I talked about before. Let's see. I don't think I've made a shoe store before. What would their shoes be like? It'd probably be pretty weird and rounded since their feet are these weird fluffy things. And their place is pretty colorful, a lot of cool designs and styles. They'd probably be pretty colorful, rounded shape, probably some really fancy designs on them and stuff. I don't think I have any blue building made yet, so that a shoe store could be a blue or something. Like already, just from those few seconds of thinking about it, I'm already onto an idea that I'm probably gonna have to make soon. Actually, what if they had roller skates? I can see a lot of shoes having roller skates on it where they are, because I imagine they probably move pretty quickly. Now, they don't usually have too much like equipment on, so maybe it'd be a good idea if they have roller skates and they have a bit more padding to them. Maybe I can make some type of padding armor thing that they could wear, but also like stylish so it fits in with everything. They also wear these earmuff headphone things a lot, so maybe having some type of helmet that can also incorporate those earmuff headphones would be a good idea. I could also do something crazy like add a rocket to it, though that might be taking it a bit too far. I wonder what the roads look like if they use a lot of roller skates and stuff, because they have to be meant for that. If it's just like a sidewalk, there'd be too many people, it'd be too busy.